Moonshine Jesus, nobody sky. Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, and welcome to Distilling the Gospel.
2 weeks in a row.
Woohoo! We are on a rock and roll right now, baby.
See, so this is our Lenten practice, is actually doing our podcast that we promised everyone to do. What we should probably be honest and confess about, like, we're actually doing this well before Lent actually begins. So, like, we're pre-gaming Lent.
That's right. We are. We're gaming the system, so to speak. We're setting ourselves up to perform well.
Mark was so excited about Lent this year. He has to get an early start.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's about. Completely what's happening here. Yeah.
So, but the good news is this one should be super short. After we talked for like 20 minutes last week, this one should be
because not only is it a short verse, we're doing our scripture, Luke 13, 31 through 35. Neither one of us are that interested in it. So, So anyway, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Good luck, all you preachers.
All right, so David, this is an interesting text.
Really?
Yeah, it's where the Pharisees are telling Jesus that Herod wants to kill him, and Jesus kind of is fairly nonchalant about it.
Yes.
And even calls Herod a fox and says, hey, I'm going to be doing my work. What's that?
It's almost playful.
It's almost playful. It almost is. Yeah, I agree. And so, what are you going to do with this text? What are your kind of initial gut instincts? What catches your interest?
Honestly, the first thing that caught my eye was looking forward to, in the Episcopal Church, we always read the John text of the crucifixion. Yeah. And there's some pretty heavy legacies of anti-Semitism in that.
Okay. Yeah.
And also thinking about how the Pharisees are always cast as the bad guys.
Yep.
In most Christian theology, like we're often talk about the Pharisees.
Well, even in the Gospels, right? They're mostly cast as the bad guys.
But here, they're trying to protect Jesus. They're worried about Jesus. And they're saying, you need to leave because Herod wants to kill you. Like if someone comes to me and says, you need to leave because somebody's trying to kill you, like that's kind of a nice courtesy.
Well, but you see, all right, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
And say, from everything else I know about the Pharisees in all of the Gospels, really, that's a hard pill to swallow. So my question then becomes, do they just not want to have their nemesis destroyed because it gives their life meaning?
So cynical. No, see, I mean, there's a good argument to be made that Jesus, there's a lot with the Pharisees that Jesus identifies with, like historically, like
yes,
Jesus is a very religious Jewish person, so like his disagreements with the Pharisees is like the disagreements within the Democratic Party. Like largely they agree on most things. Their differences are probably going to be a little, slightly less drastic, if you get my drift. And so my feeling here is that, I think that there's a lot that the Pharisees also identify with Jesus about as well. I think that relationship eventually sours, but I think this is an interesting way to complicate this picture of the Pharisees being bad guys and Jewish people being bad guys, especially if we're going to get that. And I think that Christians have an obligation after the damage that we've done to do that. I don't know if you can preach a whole sermon on this, but it's interesting that the religious elites or the religious leaders of the time are the ones who are trying to protect Jesus against
but let's not miss the point that they're not,
because it's Herod that's trying to do the damage right now, not the Pharisees. So I don't know. I think there's an interesting play there.
Let's not miss the point though that they're not just religious leaders. They know about Herod because they're also political leaders.
Sure,
they know what's in his mind and what's going on because they're also political leaders. And ultimately,
it would have been nicer for them to be like, "Hey, Herod, maybe you should think about not doing that."
Right. No, they don't do that. And ultimately, they become part of the It's not their religious side as much as it's their political side that ends up putting them over and against Jesus frequently, and ultimately playing some role, at least in a role of not saying don't do that, in the crucifixion.
No, that I think that could preach, actually.
Yeah.
That could actually preach to show the Pharisees as people who leave behind this religious affection for Jesus.
Right.
This, what I consider probably a religious affection with Jesus.
That's fair.
And then wind up getting involved with the political animosity towards him.
Right.
I think that could preach. And it could also preach particularly well in a political season where you're electing presidential candidates, where our allegiances lie and how we handle some of that. That could be a really interesting way to go, to cast ourselves in the role of the Pharisees as people in between these two ways of thinking, in a way.
Right.
That are not completely separate. I mean,
No.
Clearly Jesus is speaking about things that affect and upset Herod enough to put him on his radar.
No, I completely agree.
And so maybe that's another place to go, is that time and again, the things Jesus says are not overtly political in a way, and it's like partisan kind of way, but they are directly relate to what's going on politically in the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think it adds an interesting kind of dimension to the idea that this is ultimately, overall, a text about prophets being frightening characters. Prophets being people that folks look to kill, who aren't listened to and are sort of marginalized, and so the Pharisees looking at like that, and from a religious standpoint, having some kind of value for it and feeling affectionate towards Jesus about that. But then we ultimately see it start switching as it becomes more political, having a resistance to it. Speaks a lot about prophets and how they're received and why people might receive them positively or negatively. If what you're interested in is real spiritual growth, then a prophet, while might make you uncomfortable, you aren't likely to be dismissive of. If you're being more political, a prophet scares the crap out of you.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe Jesus kind of foresees some of that as he talks about, prophets are killed in the political center of your, because that's essentially what he's saying when he says, it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. What he's saying to me is that prophets are killed in the center of the political power of the world.
Exactly. I think that's
Jerusalem, the city that kills prophets and stones those who are sent to it. You can look throughout the world and fill in different cities or places. You can easily hear Martin Luther King Jr. talking about, Selma, or Birmingham, or Memphis, or,
Absolutely.
So there's lots of interesting ways that you can do that, because we'll still be in Black History Month right there.
Right.
And you can connect
There's some great connections.
The ongoing racial injustice in our world, and the way certain movements for racial injustice have been maligned and attempted to be discredited through a variety of ways.
Yeah.
So,
well, and speaking to Herod and Jerusalem and power and politics, Jesus also says, "How often have I wanted to gather you together under my wings as a hen, but you're not willing." Talking about protection and inclusion and family and community, and how that's what I'm wanting for all of us. But you, the powerful, don't want that, because that's it's a front to your power.
And it's such a compassionate, motherly image he uses.
Absolutely.
For his part of his mission as Jesus on the earth. This very motherly, affectionate, kind of protective, nurturing image of him doing that kind of protective. So yeah.
We told you it would be short. Actually, we've gone longer than I thought we would on this. Neither one of us really felt passionate about this particular text.
No, and that's a reminder.
There's some interesting things that are coming out of it as we talk about it.
And this is why I love doing the podcast with you, Mark, actually, is because a text that I would be completely not passionate about, talking and discussing is one of those things that it gives me directions that I can go and begin to do research, because we don't do any research before this.
Right.
This kind of helps me sometimes get excited about maybe doing a little research.
It almost never fails for me that a text I'm not interested in, after our discussion, I start seeing little edges in it, and I go, that could be something really intriguing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if I was actually preaching this Sunday, I think maybe I could come up with a short sermon.
And everyone would be all the happier for it.
Yeah, maybe for Lent, all preachers should vow to preach sermons shorter than 8 minutes. That would be a Lenten practice your entire congregation would
Could get into. They can all appreciate.
They would love Lent from that point forward. Anyway, we've wasted enough of your time. So we should probably let you guys get going and fulfilling your Lenten duties, vows, and practices. And we'll start ours by giving you a little music.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine. I won't let anybody blow it out. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, I won't let anybody blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. I won't let anybody blow it out.